All right, time to finish up the Paranormal Activity series with Paranormal Activity, the Ghost Dimension. Found footage in 3D. I actually did see this in 3D in the theater when it came out because that was the only thing they were showing at the theater I went to. And the 3D was actually kind of cool. I'm not a big 3D fan at all, but I actually kind of enjoyed it for this movie. Just when they showed Toby and the entity, I liked how it was kind of like, liquid, and it was just kind of different than you would expect. I was expecting like just a entity, just like a physical body, like that's just more solid, and this took it in a completely different direction than I thought. And then like they're like moving in and out of that like space where it would like branch out, and the liquid would like vanish everywhere and it would be floating through the screen. During those scenes, the 3D was actually super cool. So I didn't mind the 3D at the time. It's funny though that they, were okay. Let's make this the last movie and let's set it in 3D. They did the same thing with the Saw series. Obviously, they made Jigsaw now, so that wasn't the last one. But I guess that's the big send off here. Is we'll put it in 3D and finish it up. This is the unrated cut, which is 10 extra minutes. I don't know what footage yet again that is added here, but there is an alternate ending on the version if you want, and I did watch that. I'm going to talk about that here at the end. Now, this movie starts with Dennis's death from part 3 at the grandmother Lois's house, and we then get to see Katie and Christy talking to this leader, kind of guru type dude who's getting them ready for what's to come. And then we meet our new family, which this takes place in 2013, like 2 years after the events of the last movie. And they're living in Santa Rosa, California, which is where the part of the third one takes place. And while not every question is answered here for sure, there are a good amount answered. I would have liked more, but I have to say this. This is the third time I've seen it now, and this was my favorite viewing of this for sure. The first time I was pretty underwhelmed in the theaters. I just thought it was a very bad send-off for the series because I had really liked it up to that point, and I truly thought we were going to get almost every question answered here, and we didn't. And the second time I was showing it to somebody, and I was kind of showing it to them with the mindset of like, here, look, isn't it disappointing? Because they hadn't seen it yet, and they liked the other ones as well, and they kind of agreed with me. This time I went in with more of a critical eye and was like not trying to, I don't know. I think honestly what helped a lot was watching 1 through 5 first, like right in a row, like all in succession. I think that helped because there was a lot of little things that I picked up this time that I hadn't picked up in the past. I was like, oh yeah, okay, that's kind of referencing this little scene here and there. So I think this film actually does pay attention to the previous installments more so than I had previously given it credit for. So multiple watches can be good for films. Sometimes it can be bad. Sometimes films don't hold up at all. Sometimes it can have the exact same feel, and sometimes it can change for the better every time you watch it or whatever. So multiple watches can be a good thing at times. Yet again, some beautiful women in this. The mom and her friend in this are both wonderful to look at. The whole idea of this camera is, and the 3D aspect, and because in the paranormal investigating side of things, there's a lot of talk of spirit cameras and spiritual photography. And the fact that these guys had altered a camera to be able to see into the ghost dimension is a very cool concept. Now, I know a lot of people will argue that that takes away from the whole horror element that the first and others in this series has created by it's what you don't see that works and scares you and it makes your mind wander. But after so many films, and you're into the sixth entry into this series, it's not a bad thing to change it up and to start showing it to us. Because if it's all left in the dark, then we're just seeing the same movie over and over again. So while I do agree that with the first one, the less is better, but in this one, although the execution isn't excellent, I do really like the idea, and it does bring a new flavor to the series. So the spirit photography, the camera, being able to see stuff like this, I really like where their head was at, but as I said, I'm not sure it was executed amazingly. And really funny scene in this movie is when she's trying to get her husband's attention, and she's like, come upstairs and your wife will have sex with you, and she's all trying to be sexy and turns around and runs into the wall. That's just great stuff. That's cute little writing right there. Makes you laugh. And also the time travel, time distortion, that kind of stuff. This is another thing. I'm of two minds on it within any of these kinds of movies, especially when it's introduced later on. Because in the first one, there's no time travel or anything like it. The time travel element isn't even introduced really until the marked ones. So we don't have that being put into the series until much later. So the fact that they're able to fuck with time in this one so openly, while I do think it is cool in ways, it also poses more questions than it answers. And I definitely will get into those. So as I said, there are definitely things I like about it. Like, for instance, when they're watching the video and Christy is being talked to by this leader guy, and he's sitting there and he's like, oh, well, what can you see? And she's like, I see toys and TVs, lots of them, and brothers. And then, Leela walks into the room, the little girl, and she sneezes, and Christy says, bless you, like right in that moment. That stuff is really cool and eerie and creepy. And if you were in there at that time, in that situation, you'd be so fucking freaked out of your mind, you wouldn't know what to do with yourself. That is out there shit. So I like that they took risks and that they did something different and that they had fun with it. But I'll get into the negatives on that because it creates paradoxes. And yes, time travel is tricky, and yes, it's fiction, so don't get too much into it. And there's plenty of films that I watch that creates all sorts of paradoxes. Back to the Future, all sorts of things. So I'm not saying I'm completely like, nope, there's paradoxes. It's just anytime you mess around with time travel, things get really, really confusing. In a series that's already pretty confusing. As well as they stick to the continuity within the film, they also don't answer a lot of questions that they raise. And that can be frustrating. For someone like me especially. And this is something I talk about in a lot of these, is like, the whole point of recording this footage is to then see the footage later and then, react to it and act accordingly. And one of the first things that happens when they're filming with that camera, the ghost dimension camera, Leela's in the bathroom and she's looking in the mirror and she puts her hand on the thing and the handprint she leaves is more bigger than hers and looks like a demon's hand. And then he leaves the camera there and then the demon like pulls his hand away and then the mirror breaks. Like, that's never addressed again. Why didn't he see that footage and go, what the fuck? And how could he not? Because people could be like, well, maybe he just didn't check that tape, whatever. He didn't question why his mirror was busted, and he had a camera pointing right at it in between the time that it wasn't busted and then it was. I'm sorry, he would have checked the footage to see who did it. He would have saw that and he would have said, we're moving right now. So those kinds of moments are stupid. I'm sorry, that scene, that moment, it's just there for a jump scare. It's just there to be a little whoa, dumb. That shit's dumb and I don't like it. It's just lazy. Anyway, I had talked about in Paranormal Activity 3 how we get to see for a very small glimpse the bed of the, boyfriend and girlfriend in the movie catch on fire, because I was mad that their house did not burn down in part 3. Now, we do get to find out in this one that their house did eventually burn down in 1993, the house that they lived in with their grandmother, Lois. So that actually answers a big question and kind of eliminates something that's been annoying to me throughout the series, because it's like, why didn't the house burn down? Well, they never said the house when they were 8 burned down. They just said they had a house fire and that burned down their house. And we are led to believe it's when it happened when they're 8, but they have tapes in 93 and their house burns down in 93. So, and then this house is built on top of the ruins of that house. I love that is addressed and brought up, and I can put that question to bed now, and part 3 is off the hook for not answering that big burning question. Burning question. Wow. I didn't even mean to do that. We find out that Leela died at birth and was born the same day as Hunter. And we even find out that Toby himself stands at the foot of the bed and just sits there creepily for hours, which then makes us believe that, or I guess is suggesting that Katie or Christy or all the people who do this throughout the films are possessed by Toby in that moment, and that's like his thing. That's his Michael Myers head cock or whatever. That's his thing. He likes to sit and watch people sleep for hours. What? I don't know. Maybe he's just like can't wait to be a human again so that he can rest. Maybe he's a demon and they haven't been able to rest for thousands of years. I'm really going off on a limb here with my theories, but why not? Fuck it. And yeah, I mean, we get to see, he sees the footage of a demon. Like, straight up, in the bedroom, in Leela's bedroom, a demon comes through and a face appears in the movement that whips past him. He gets a freeze frame of a fucking demon's face. And they didn't move. They didn't leave that house instantly. Bull fucking shit. No way. That is proof. Proof. Like, people would argue maybe like, oh, you had, computer generated imagery, you fucked with the images, whatever, like the dad does in part 4, but I'm sorry. You're moving instantly. With your kid, get the fuck out of here. And then after that, she's sleeping in her bedroom alone. After that happened, not only they didn't move, but then they put their daughter in her bedroom alone, and all the activity's been happening around her. Come on. That's just too much. That's just too much to believe. And I guess that biting is just a thing in this because Leela bites a kid at school. A lot of biting going on in this series. And I like that Christy and Katie are in and out of this series, the young ones. I wish we could have saw Katie in this. It is hinted at that she is the real estate agent that sold them the house. who I'm guessing they just owned the house and then sold it to them, but they didn't really sell it to them so that they would just stay there, and they lured them in there. But it sucks that we didn't even get to see Katie, but I guess technically it would have given it away. I just feel like at the very bare minimum, they could have seen it in a news article, like, you know, kid goes missing, sister is suspected to be culprit, or sister's body was never found, or whatever. And then they could have showed a picture of Katie on the screen. They could have been like, oh my God, that's our real estate agent. Like anything to tell us outright that Katie was. The only thing we get is a name with a different last name, and we're just supposed to be like, okay, I guess that's Katie, without seeing her at all in the film. That was just kind of a little bit of a missed opportunity there. She could have appeared somewhere within the film. And the Santa costume is actually a pretty fucking creepy moment, honestly. The fact that he like turns around, his wife's there, and then he turns back and the guy's gone, and then his daughter's door is open, and they're just kind of like, oh my God, okay, what the hell? They would pick up their daughter, they would get in the car, and they would leave. There's so many moments in this movie where they would leave. They don't find out until way deep into the film that they can't just leave because she's the one possessed. Like something I talk about all the time. She's the one that's haunted, not the house. But it's ridiculous. They do take her to a hotel at least once in this movie. And Hunter, we find out, was taken back to 1992. This is where the time distortion and the time jumping goes. Like Hunter is in the videos in 1992, I think is what I have it written down as 92, so that must be. So yeah, after the events of 4, I don't know if it's 93 or 92, but whatever, he's taken back in time, and he's there with Katie and Christy as kids. So I thought that was actually pretty interesting. The doorway that they go through in here, it's a cool concept, but that's a huge spoiler. I don't feel like that should be on the cover. But there's so many reactions to this movie. Like, she has this shit written around the walls, and I don't know. The parents just really need to react a little bit better there. And then they take her to the hotel, and then she shows up back at the house like 6 miles away. Reminds me of The Last Exorcism. I thought that was pretty cool. Like, that I like. The fact that they try to take her out of there, and then she just would keep appearing back at the house. Like, nothing they can do to get her out of there. They'd take her, and then she'd disappear. They could have played off of that. Like, that could have been done a couple times throughout the movie, and that would have been pretty cool. Like, all right, we've taken her out of here enough. Like, we need to deal with this problem in-house, literally. So I think that would have been a better way to go about it, because just straight out ignoring it or just being like, oh my God, that was crazy. It's like, this isn't crazy. This is fucking way beyond crazy. But yeah, anyway. And finally, we get an extermination. He doesn't want to do an exorcism. He wants to do a fucking straight up extermination. So at least they call in help. And I'm not usually a big fan of like exorcisms or religion being brought into this, but this is a fucking straight up demon that's been possessing them and following them around. I mean, what else are you gonna do here? You gotta bring it in. The hot blonde chick has acid vomit. I guess Toby possesses her for a moment, and then she's able to, expel bile that's just acidic and eats through the brother's face. This is a new power we haven't seen before. Why didn't he do that with Katie or Christy or anyone else in the house if he can enter? Maybe it's after an extermination he's able to like take possession. Who knows what the fucking rules are. The hand through the dad's chest when he's running with her looks horrible. That was a terrible decision. That was silly. Like, how does Toby all of a sudden have the power to rip through somebody? And why doesn't he just do it anyway? Like, throughout the movies, like, he could do whatever he wants. That just asks way too many questions. But the fact that he's able to bend Dennis backwards and break him in half. Like, Katie was his hitman before. She killed Mika. Then she killed, her sister and her husband, and and then not until part 3 at the end does he kill Dennis, like just outright, which just kind of is like, oh, okay, I guess he has that power back in 88, but he doesn't in 2005. Like, does he became weaker? I don't know, but you could talk about time. But in 93, like, because at the end of this movie, Toby does come back to fruition. He becomes embodied in some, we don't get to see what he actually looks like, whose body he took over. I don't know. Maybe at the end that was, the kid from the ghost dimension, sorry, the marked ones. Maybe that's that kid who Toby finally took over his body, because he's supposed to be a vessel, or it's Hunter, but Hunter was brought back to that time period in which she's taken to. She's taken to like 92. Hunter would still be a child at that time because Hunter was brought back. Unless they took Hunter back to the present, like they're talking about, they're making fun of the title of Back to the Future in part 3. But like they'd have to bring Hunter to age and then bring him back to then become Toby. But then Toby wouldn't have if Toby existed at this time. Why does he not exist in 2005? There's alternate dimensions in which Toby does and does not exist at a certain time. This is what I'm talking about. There's just too many questions that get posed when you start traveling in time. And the fact that Toby is brought back into human form in the past adds way too many questions. So they should have had Toby come into, like, they should have had Katie and Christy, I don't know. They should have had Toby come out and taken over someone's body, or have a new body. I don't know. They said that it has to be somebody's body, right? I mean, that's what Hunter was for. That's what these kids were for. The marked ones were for. So why wouldn't it have been them later? Like, why did they go back in the past? That's just, that frustrates me. And then I watched the alternate ending, and the alternate ending is super lame. It's right after her extermination. It does work, and they jump 4 months later, and they're moving into a new house where they stayed for 4 months. I don't know. An apartment, who knows? Doesn't matter. But they're moving into a new house. They find a tape. They break it because they're like, no, I don't want anything more to do with this. Katie and Christy show up as children, like from 92, 93. They're there in the present as their age in that time. So like 13 and whatever, 10 or something. And then the guru guy, the leader guy, is at her birthday party later, and the wife's pregnant, and Leela, wishes for a boy, and the leader's like, yeah, like so I guess they joined the cult, and the cycle is starting over. It just was a dumb ending. I'm sorry. This one, the one we get is very like all over the place with all the questions that we have to ask, but the other one is just outright stupid to me. So I'm glad they didn't go with that one. All right, guys, I am done with the Paranormal Activity series. So on to Monster Monday, I guess.